making this kind of move would be a really big mistake. In a vacuum, like Zach LaVine is a better player than MPJ. You're making the roster more top heavy, and yes, you're consolidating Zeke. So it's like, yeah, we're getting off of Zeke's money, yay. You're committing to that backcourt, locking yourself into a certain roster build, which is Jamal plus Zach LaVine, alongside Nikola Jokic, who is not a good rim protector, and in effect recreating maybe a better version because you have Jokic, maybe a worse version because the backcourt's equal to not as good as the CJ Dame Portland Trailblazers.
I remember watching MPJ make his first start and being excited to watch him, and seeing him grow over his career with the Nuggets has been really awesome to see, and we won a championship with him. So of course fans are attached to him. He's been more and more professional as time goes on. A lot of fans are not excited about the prospect of trading MPJ.
We're top 5 offense, and the issue has been the defense, and they want to get smaller and make the defense worse. Just need them to lock in here.
News came out of The Athletic from Tony Jones and Sam Amick about the Nuggets' interest in Zach LaVine's market and some others, which we'll go over. And of course, that means those players with those contracts, in order to get them, MPJ would be on the trade block. I think it started slowly trickling into Nuggets Nation that there's a reality that MPJ could be leaving in a trade at some point during this deadline. It's not guaranteed, of course. We'll talk about whether that's a good idea or not. But the fact that even this is being seriously reported, and in that report said that the Nuggets had preliminary talks already, means that it's happening. It's not like, I mean, it wasn't saying there was serious discussions like a deal's imminent or anything. So, you never know.
I don't know what preliminary trade discussions even means. What the difference between expressed interest in or have had preliminary trade discussions even means. But the article lists a bunch of people that apparently Denver has been looking at. Just for context, right? This article came out in The Athletic, and like you said, it was Sam Amick, along with Tony Jones, who's The Athletic's new Nuggets beat writer. He covers both the Nuggets and the Jazz, and so he has sources of his own within the org as well. But it seems like a lot of the sourcing for this article came from quote unquote league sources. And, we can talk a little bit about what it sounds like, where it sounds like some of this information is coming from. But did you want to talk about how the bulk of the article went over LaVine first?
I kind of wanted to just start with the MPJ angle of it before we get into any ideas of who the best fit might be for us, and even if we even want this to happen, or what you think about it. But, the first thing everyone thinks with MPJ, if you're a Nuggets fan, that, you're going to be emotional about it. You'll be sentimental. MPJ was a very unknown prospect when we drafted him. We kind of took a flyer on him because of his health. He bought into his role.
I mean, he was known, but his ability to
unknown
play
whether he would be
basketball good in the NBA was unknown because of the health factors.
Yeah. So it's just a great story. I remember just watching MPJ make his first start and being excited to watch him, and seeing him grow over his career with the Nuggets has been really awesome to see. And we won a championship with him. So of course fans are attached to him. He's been more and more professional as time goes on. And so the first just thing about it is that it sucks. It's a lot of fans are not excited about the prospect of trading MPJ. So with that out of the way. Yeah.
Can I just interrupt you really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
You going over the sort of brief highlights of, MPJ's time in Denver. It reminds me of those montages that happen in a TV show right before a character gets killed off, where all the people in their lives are remembering their best moments with them. And you just know, you're oh no, they're totally about to kill X character off.
Yeah.
And I'm oh my gosh.
I know. It is like that. I honestly don't know how likely it is or not. But I mean, we talked about it in multiple past episodes, the last 3 episodes, how MPJ is the most likely to be sent away because the financial reality and just the only way to get trades done like this is to trade MPJ, sadly. So I don't know if fans are confused about that, because the idea that we would trade MPJ, who's playing really well, doesn't make sense to them because he's not really the problem with the team, right? And so it doesn't make sense to trade MPJ, but it's only...
also true that you don't normally trade the thing that's the problem, because they tend to be at
Yeah.
the player is at the nadir of their value. And if you don't want to, basically get fleeced in negotiations, you wait until they're like higher in their value. So it's kind of in a way always antithetical to, the logic you might think when it comes to like what you'd want to
Trading.
do on the one side of a trade.
Yeah, I know. It's always both teams are getting stuff that they think's going to help them and probably getting some stuff that might be some downsides. Like it's
Yeah.
there's rarely, I mean, there's of course slam dunk trades where someone flees someone and all that. Like, the Nuggets trading for Aaron Gordon and sending out RJ Hampton and Gary Harris. Not that Gary's
That was
bad,
for
but
sure.
we were emotional about Gary Harris back then too, but AG ended up being amazing. And I think some people even were questioning AG's fit at the time, even though I was personally excited about that. And I've seen Ryan Blackburn even float the idea with Zach LaVine that, Nuggets fans may not see the whole vision with LaVine coming in, and he could play a different kind of role than they expect, kind of like AG. That's like the wishful thinking side of it if the LaVine trade
I did
goes
see
through.
Ryan Blackburn compare Zach LaVine to Aaron Gordon in that particular way.
Yeah.
I disagree with that comparison myself, because I think there are like vastly different fit concerns than there were with AG, but maybe that's just me speaking in hindsight because I was not part of the fan base before the Nuggets got AG.
Yeah, with AG, it was more, I think he was playing in a way that wasn't suiting him on the Magic, right? And so when he comes here, he gets to play a role that's better suited to him. Whereas with Zach LaVine, I don't know that there's like an obvious use case where that is the same thing, right? Because it's like, how is he being used in Chicago where he'd be used differently in Denver?
He might be used like the same way, which is fine.
Yeah.
We can get into like the specifics of the LaVine deal, but was there more that you wanted to say about MPJ before we did that?
Just that I think if you're a fan and if you think we can win the title with this roster, then, we don't need to make a trade. And
I mean,
whatever.
lots of fans don't think that that's the case, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
These rumors wouldn't even be swirling if the Nuggets had. I mean, we talked about on our last show. Like, I really quote-tweeted it and I said, as a doom time, like what's going on with the team. And we went through, all these different problems that they've been having, right?
Yeah.
And it, like, this is the thing with like winning cures all ills. Obviously, they're on a 3-game win streak right now. We're going to talk about that. But they were really struggling before that. And they've started this, like, people can cite, and I have cited, the record to start the season all they want and how it's not that different from the last 2 years. But the team looks different in some pretty important qualitative and quantitative ways. And it's pretty clear there are particular areas where they are even still struggling, and we'll talk about that, even if some aspects have picked up over the last few games.
Yeah, and so, I mean, let's just kind of break down the options just quickly. It's like either you are confident in what the Nuggets are doing and think they can get it together and win a title with this roster, or you admit that the roster needs some changes. And
Big
so,
ones, right? Because there are marginal moves that we've talked about that they could do. But
yeah,
if you're talking about, obviously, if you're talking about trading somebody that's part of the core, like, you think they need big changes.
Yeah, and even with the marginal moves, I think they're extremely difficult to execute. I mean, like, with the contracts and making the trade work even for Zach LaVine, like, you need a Jalen Pickett or, like, those the other small contracts to get the money to match. So
right.
So it's
but
like
you need a team that's
difficult.
willing to take those guys on. Like, I'm not blind to that fact, and it's annoying that we were sold a false bill of goods about flexibility this summer, only to not have any flexibility to make moves on the margins and be left with a platter of only the biggest possible moves are available to you, in a way that I think, looks like a panic move.
Yeah, well, so it's like you need to use those smaller contracts to even match a trade, but that's difficult because does a team even have the roster spots to take those many players to get the money to match the trade? So it's just that's the whole idea, is that it's difficult for the Nuggets to even execute a trade, which is why MPJ is the pathway, because he has a $35 million contract, and you want to get actual contributors. They're going to cost money, and we only have big money to move. That's just how the contracts of these teams are constructed. So we only have big money that
is like that other teams would be willing to take on. The small money contracts we have, other teams don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to use, that's the little silver lining of if you move MPJ is you probably include a Zeke, you probably include some other people. So you could get back some players and maybe some roster spots are freed up. I don't know exactly how a trade would shake out, but that could be some of what we could see happen. So it's just if you agree at all that the Nuggets need a roster change or anything, MPJ is going to have to be traded. And so that's just the reality of it, whether you like it or not. So you can
I don't like it, for the record.
Okay. So it's like we can wait out this season and keep MPJ on the team, keep the roster together. But it's like, what is the result of that going to be? And are fans willing to accept that?
I mean, I don't think they care what fans are willing to accept, because we were upset last trade deadline when they did nothing with the backup center situation. And
they don't care, but I'm just saying, I'm talking to the fans right now. I'm just saying.
Well, I know, but I mean, I'm speaking for the fans also, right? It's like, are fans willing to accept that? I don't think the front office cares what fans are willing to accept, because they didn't really care when they didn't do anything last trade deadline. They didn't really care when they let KCP walk in free agency. They apparently don't care now when they're letting all these trade rumors leak out. Like, whether you're going to do the deal or not, letting all of these trade rumors leak out in the middle of the season is, not good. Matt Moore was saying something the other day, I think it was on Locked On Nuggets, where he talked about how the Spurs, like, they just don't even call about anybody unless they 100% want somebody.
Yeah.
Because they don't. Looks obviously this information doesn't necessarily come out from your own front office, and we didn't talk about that part of the article. But I think most of the information is coming from sources around the league, from all kinds of front offices that have gotten calls from the Nuggets, and everyone is making it sound like the Nuggets are kind of hair on fire, calling everybody, trying to figure out if anybody is willing to take anything for anything. Like, they're just trying to make a move, is what it sounds like from all the reports, not just this one, where they are like panicked about this roster. And like, I get it, but it's also like, you literally built this roster.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, what are we doing right now?
I mean, you can see it as panicking, but also, I mean, that's a great order of business if you're the Spurs. Like, don't call unless you want someone. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of names and a lot of teams included in this article. So
why don't you go over some of the names that they said have?
Sure.
I'll just like read this quick, the opening quote. The Nuggets have either expressed interest in or have had preliminary trade discussions on the following players. Take it away.
Okay, so we got Jordan Poole with the Wizards, and also included in that was Jonas Valanciunas. You got the Jazz's Jordan Clarkson, and then the Atlanta Hawks, DeAndre Hunter and company. Like, any player on the Hawks besides Trae Young and such could be available in something with a deal for MPJ. And then Brooklyn, of course, Cam Johnson, and anyone on the Nets around him as well.
Right. And obviously Zach LaVine, who's the main focus of this particular article.
So it paints the picture that Booth's been calling around and surveying. It could just be like calling and saying, hey, like, where are you at on these guys? Are they available? And then those front office people and sources are reporting, yeah, the Nuggets called and asked about this guy. That could be literally all it is. I don't know where Booth stands. My thing is it is a bit of a panic trade by definition, because you're admitting, hey, the roster's not good enough, so we need to make a trade now.
You're admitting that the roster that you built isn't good enough, so I'm supposed to trust you to make another big move.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's only one trade that the Nuggets can make it, and that is MPJ plus Zeke plus people.
Or MPJ plus whatever plus people. Or, because you talked about turning MPJ into multiple players, but when it comes to the Zach LaVine deal, they're talking about doing the opposite. They're talking about a consolidation trade to turn a top-heavy roster into a more top-heavy roster has
a like 1-for-1 MPJ for LaVine wouldn't be. You like can't do a
1-for-1 because LaVine makes more money than MPJ, so you'd have to aggregate. And it would have to be MPJ and Zeke, and potentially a pick. Which debatable. I would be very against, but it is debatable. Right. But it's also like, I mean, in a vacuum, like Zach LaVine is a better player than MPJ, right? They talk a lot in this article about how the Nuggets are really concerned with adding wing scoring and on-ball creation. If MPJ was a better shot creator on the ball, like this wouldn't be, in the discussion. Like, I'm not blind to that. He's definitely not a good shot creator on the ball. He's not like someone who you can put the ball in his hands and he can go get you a bucket, right? He has to get everything off the ball, and even off ball, like, he has some limitations. We've talked about how, he struggles sometimes off of, certain DHOs, and he's like not really great off of screens unless he's coming off ball screens. Versus, like, I don't even know what to call this, but it's like an on-ball screen is like a little bit different because you're coming off of the same screen where you're getting the ball, like, whatever. MPJ has some struggles in that because he has limits to, his own body's like flexibility in certain ways, and he doesn't always have his feet set, and this and that. That's just true, right? So if you're looking for more on-ball creation, it would make more sense to try to get it on the wing. My issue with a LaVine trade in particular is that, one, like I said, you're making the roster more top heavy, and yes, you're consolidating Zeke. So it's like, yeah, we're getting off of Zeke's money, yay. But you're turning Zeke's money plus MPJ's money into another player that you're not going to be able to move, and so you're locking yourself into a certain roster build, which is Jamal plus Zach LaVine. Because I'm telling you right now, look at how much to do Chicago has gone through to try to move Zach LaVine. And we don't even know if they're going to be able to move Zach LaVine this year, right? Like, this is not a deal that's gone through. It's rumored interest that the Nuggets may have had, or maybe some preliminary trade discussions, right? Jamal has not had Zach LaVine's regular season production, and he has more years left on his max contract than Zach LaVine does. He's not going anywhere, okay? So if we get Zach LaVine, we are, in effect, committing to the build of a Jamal Murray, Zach LaVine backcourt for the remainder of Nikola Jokic's prime, which I am very much not a fan of. And I say locked in. It's different if you were getting, if LaVine was like on an expiring deal. I still don't love that, but maybe you'd be able to extend him at a smaller number, and then he'd be like more movable in the future if and when that particular build doesn't work out particularly defensively. But he's got more years left on his deal. He's got, I think it's the same number of years as MPJ, actually. So this year plus 2 more, including the player option at the end of the deal, which means that that's the build that you're going to be locked into for the next, like, at least 2.5 years. And who knows if you extend him after that, I don't know. But at least for that, and then you have to consider that Jamal's 4-year deal starts next season. You won't be able to move either of those contracts. The reason that we would get LaVine is because Chicago is trying to offload him, right?
Yeah. I do think you can still trade Jamal, but it would be tough.
I don't, because look at how difficult it is to trade Zach LaVine.
I know, but
with less money on the deal. And look, you can include picks and do all that. I'm not saying that you can't, but you're going to get fleeced in that deal, is what I'm saying.
I'm just saying you're not necessarily...
You're either not going to trade him or you're going to get fleeced in that deal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's scary either way. You're essentially locked in, and then you have to do some drastic shit to get out of it.
That's the thing, is like, they decided when they extended Jamal this summer, and like, I don't blame them for this. They had no choice when they extended Jamal this summer to the max deal, right? They could have tried to get a smaller number. There was no reporting that they were trying to get a smaller number. There was reporting that they were trying to get stipulations that I'm like, what does this even do? They, in effect, committed themselves to Jamal as part of the backcourt. If they do this deal and trade MPJ for Zach LaVine, they are committing themselves for the next 2 to 3 years, which could be the remainder of Nikola Jokic's prime. We don't know how much longer his prime is going to last, although he's just like on this ridiculous trajectory, as we'll get to in our last segment. You're committing to that backcourt. You're committing to a Jamal Murray, Zach LaVine backcourt alongside Nikola Jokic, who is not a good rim protector, and in effect recreating maybe a better version because you have Jokic, maybe a worse version because the backcourt's, equal to not as good as the CJ Dame Portland Trailblazers, who ranked where defensively over the course of that tenure?
Yeah, it was a massive issue.
Yeah. And it's not even that I don't think both of these guys can't lock in defensively. You look at a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is part of the reason that I don't ever fully believe in the Cavs even though they've like kind of solved some of their offensive issues, they get into a playoff series with the Boston Celtics, and Tatum and Brown are just going to pick them apart on the wing, because as much as Mobley and Jarrett Allen can cover for Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, a locked in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland with their interior presence, which the Nuggets do not have, right? Because you're building a team around Nikola Jokic. You cannot hide those guys in the playoffs. And they are getting picked on by bigger wings constantly and consistently. And even if you can have two guards who are not like particularly defensively oriented and try to get them to lock in on defense and be like good and like solid and just have them be steady, but you're never going to have, then you're not going to have somebody, except at we can talk about what would happen with the small forward position on the Nuggets. You're not going to have multiple players who can actually bother the other team's best perimeter players, right? Because there's a difference between being like solid on defense and being disruptive and being impactful.
Yeah, and then being
we're kind of seeing like, Giannis, we're going to talk about this with the with the Bucks. Like Giannis has to go like claiming some like old glory days God mode on defense to make up for a Dame Gary Trent Jr. backcourt on defense.
Yeah, and the Nuggets are not like that. So.
Right. We have AG, but AG's not Giannis. Like that's just a fact, right? Jokic is definitely not Giannis defensively, or Brook Lopez, right? Because the Bucks have both of those guys that can at least kind of mimic what Cleveland is doing and sort of making up for the the shortcomings of their backcourt defensively. And even the Bucks, eventually they're like, oh, we got to start Andre Jackson Jr. to make up for some of this stuff on the perimeter. But it's just like, and the other thing is like, okay, maybe this doesn't work, and then we could try to pivot away from it. The way that you go about this, where you trade MPJ, consolidate his and another deal for a bigger contract that's going to be difficult to move alongside Jamal, that's a contract that I am as certain as any contract. I'm almost as certain as Nikola Jokic is not going to be moved, that Jamal Murray is not going to be moved for at least 3 years of his deal. Okay. You are locked in. And so you remove flexibility from yourself in going through with this kind of deal. So I feel very strongly this is a bad idea to do right now. Like if you're trading MPJ for a star that you're not going to be able to pivot off of, it should be a home run fit, not just with Jokic, but with the other players on your roster that you're stuck with, i.e. Jamal Murray.
Yeah, it's not like he's a AG where you're super happy with him being on the Nuggets for this foreseeable future. And obviously we extended him. But yeah, you are like, we already have problems with the roster flexibility because we're so top heavy. So you're just adding more to it. So it's a very, very good point. Yeah. And there's like basketball concerns too, which you touched on for sure. Just real quick before I comment on that.
I mean, you can talk about some of the good stuff too, because offensively, like I think Zach LaVine could obviously add more on-ball creation on the wing, and having two good on-ball creators in Jamal and Zach together like could be really nice. We're going to talk about how some of that has looked when it's Russell Westbrook and Jamal. Not that I think that's necessarily sustainable, but it shows you like part of the model. And we kind of had that when we had Bruce and Jamal.
Yeah. And I think in regards to Calvin Booth making a move, I just think, like I said, I mean, MPJ is the only person you can trade just to make a trade happen. It's not that we want to trade him. It's just the reality and the financial
If you're trying to make a big trade, yes. If you're trying to trade anything for more than like $13 million, then yes.
But the question is then who are you getting back? And that is the decision that I get people not trusting Booth with. So you just said very good points why you're strongly against LaVine. And I agree, just because, like everyone has said, we're not worried about the offense, really. Like, it would be nice, to have Zach LaVine's skill set and have another creator.
And, like, I'm not obtuse. I know that even though we're fifth in offense right now, there are specific concerns still with the half-court offense for a playoff setting. But, like, are you going to make it there if you can't get stops, even in the regular season?
Yeah, and, like, we are obviously, I think we and many are very concerned about the defense first and foremost. So... we had KCP, like, so it's like that's the guy we need. Anyway, but so we want more 3-and-D players and screen navigators and such to put with Jokic, not necessarily Zach LaVine. So the more I think about it, and just like over last night and this morning, I definitely am not excited about a Zach LaVine trade. If they do it, I'll obviously hope it works. But I would rather us do a deal with, if we were going to, like the Nets or the Hawks, and some kind of construction trade around that with like Cam Johnson and who else would be in the Nets Cam Johnson trade?
I've seen some Dorian Finney-Smith trade machine images circulating. I thought it was more interesting when like potentially Schroeder could have been in that package, but obviously he's gone now. Just to get another like, oh yeah, he's a great screen navigator and he can obviously give you some on-ball juice on top of that, but obviously not in the cards. But I think Dorian Finney-Smith would help with some of our issues. Like part of the problem with if you trade MPJ, you have two playable power forwards on your roster. And, MPJ is the starting small forward, but he plays backup four now because like we just don't have another playable four, and Peyton's a little small. And even when he's on the floor, like you need some more, size on there to help out with the rebounding, which is why DeAndre Jordan has become the new, pretty much solidified backup center. You need another power forward because you can't just have AG. Even if he's playing backup five, like you just need another big body on the roster. And so Dorian Finney-Smith would make a lot of sense there. This is part of the reason that teams don't tend to like to do a 1-to-1 trades for like a particular position. Usually two different positions, right? Because you need to like keep some kind of roster balance intact. And to be fair, our roster is already heavily skewed towards power forwards. It's just that a bunch of them are unplayable.
So, you have like Cam Johnson from the Nets, which would be interesting. I've heard mixed feelings on that. I think a lot of people would be happier and easy. It would be easier to accept a Cam Johnson move over a Zach LaVine, obviously, and a Dorian Finney-Smith.
Right. And it would also make more sense to me, in terms of maintaining your flexibility and even improving your flexibility, you'd break MPJ's contract up into multiple contracts by getting more players back instead of consolidating him with another player to get another star. But right, there's some competing interests there, because you talked about the need in some instances to open up another roster spot. Obviously, like even if you wanted to do the Cam Johnson Dorian Finney-Smith deal, you'd have to waive somebody, unless you wanted to trade 3 guys to the Nets for 2 players, because we just don't have any roster spots. And so there's also that complication too. It's like, are you more concerned with trying to get more good players back and then having to eat like a little bit of dead money from having to waive like a Jalen Pickett or, even waiving Vlatko? Or are you more concerned with trying to make sure that you create a new roster spot by consolidating players in a trade, which ends up getting you, a more expensive player? And that to me, like I said before, I just think from the pure calculated roster building standpoint, I think that making this kind of move in a way that leaves you less flexible in the future than we are right now, which is like trying to figure out how to make something work, would be a really big mistake, going forward when it comes to like trying to build a championship team around Jokic.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to, is how aggressive does the front office want to be to reshape the roster, just to like we've always been talking about, maximizing Jokic and making sure we're competing, because I think it's very legitimate to think that just holding steady with this roster is not going to cut it if you want to win a championship this season.
I think that's totally fair because of how they'd struggled.
And maybe the front office is fine with that, and they're like, okay, another gap year, kind of like we talked about or whatever, and you're still going to have to trade MPJ this summer if you want to like do something though. So I don't know what is going to happen in the summer where we could then fix the team. There's like some trade ideas from the Hawks, like, it could be Hunter, could be with Bogey and Nance. I don't know why the Hawks would say yes to that. I think that's like way too much.
I mean, if they're trying to pivot to a rebuild.
But like, let's say like Strother could be included in that. So it's like Strother,
Well,
MPJ.
that would be why they do it. Is like,
Right.
we don't even play. Like Nance was a DNP in their last NBA Cup game. We don't even play this guy. Maybe we could try to get like a young player out of it. Also, I mean, this was reported literally right before we recorded that Kobe Buffkin, their young backup point guard, has suffered a shoulder injury and he's going to be out, I think, indefinitely. I don't know that he's out for the season, but he's going to miss some significant time. So they're probably like, okay, maybe the party's over. We need to. And it's not like they can pivot to rebuild because the Spurs own their picks, but they also are like, what are we doing right now? The Hawks are kind of a mess. I don't understand that team.
I haven't like seriously thought about what players I want to get back for MPJ. That's the perfect fit to really push us over the edge and get a title this season.
There's no trade that would come to save them, right?
Yeah.
There are certain things about how the team has been playing that only they could improve internally. Like when it comes to the things I think they need, it's almost all stuff that's like coming from the bench, right? It's trying to, find some secondary shot creation. I don't think you have to go out and spend $40 million on Zach LaVine to get it. Like we won a championship in dominant fashion where our secondary on-ball creator was Bruce Brown off the bench, just because of how much Jokic makes other players better. Actually, that brings me to another point that I had. Like Zach LaVine is a really good player, obviously, right? Like he got the contract that he got for a reason at the time. Whether just like Jamal is a really good player, even though he has had his struggles, and like LaVine's had his struggles, and he also has had his injury issues, and that's another problem. Like if you trade MPJ, you're trading the player who's like played the most games for us over the last 2 years, and so that becomes its own separate issue. But a lot of people talk about how like if you get like basically an all-star caliber player next to Jokic, is he going to put up like even better numbers? And I think that Jokic does make other players better. Like don't get me wrong about that. But I'd also like people to consider the possibility that his numbers are the same or even go down slightly, not because he's like worse around Jokic, but because Jokic ball is a more egalitarian basketball than most teams play. And just by virtue of like shot distribution, he might not, just get as many opportunities. And so he might have like the same splits that he has in Chicago. Like I think that there's a possibility that there's a point of like diminishing returns with Jokic. And I don't think it's the reason that Jokic has never played with an all-star, but I'm kind of curious about what happens when you bring that caliber of player here. Whether they actually like reach this like, oh, we're going to turn them like they're going to look like a 1A next to Jokic. Like I don't think that's the case necessarily.
I would be very curious to see, but it's difficult to get us in a situation where we could see that. So,
but I think that he raises up high IQ players who have some kind of skill that they can do. Particularly on ball. Like if you can do something on ball and you're high IQ, even if you have other limitations, like Jokic is going to make you look amazing.
You would think
like,
it would
look
be
at Christian.
so easy.
Christian's about to get super paid because he can like run in transition and cut and finish at the rim. And that's like kind of all he can do right now. The shooting he's kind of gone through a bit of a shooting slump over the last 10 games or so. And he's still going to get like massively paid.
MPJ, Zeke, Strother, for Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown.
Not giving up Julian and MPJ. Like you get one.
Just the money is the only way to do it. But yeah.
Put Pickett in there.
Yeah, but the Raptors, why would they do that trade?
Masai, do us another solid. Like I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know that Kelly Olynyk was playing for this year until recently because he wasn't playing in for the first month.
Is he hurt or something? I don't know what's going on.
Maybe he was hurt because I was like, where's their backup center? Like, what's going on
That
here?
is funny, Masai, and like even the Bulls GM, Arturis has connections with the Nuggets. So Swipa was suggesting, Booth maybe be able to Desumu, being like, Arturis, we need Jokic to win championships. Do us a solid. Send us this dude. Like, come on. So that would be pretty amusing. But I agree, saddling ourselves to a big contract like Zach LaVine when we're already like strapped to do anything with these huge contracts.
We won't be able. That's problem. The thing is like, if you're going to do that consolidation move, it should be your home run move.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is the home run move. And the reason I think it should be your home run move is because you're not going to be able to do much after that. Like, you're going to be
Yeah.
more strapped than you are right now.
If you are someone listening and you don't want to trade MPJ, completely fair. If you're someone who says, hey, let's go all in and try and do whatever we can and win it this year and make a big trade and let's go for it. I could also see some of that. It's just a matter of seeing what we decide and who we bring back and if it works out. So we'll be monitoring that as time goes on. But
I just had this last tweet I wanted to read out because this obviously came in the middle of the NBA Cup, the NBA Cup finals, and I think that the reporting, like the sourcing and all this, the legwork was probably done around the time the Nuggets were like really struggling. They were going 500, like losing every other game, losing games to the Wizards, etc. Right. Similar to how the Ramona Shelburne article was clearly all written as they struggled through their preseason and their first two losses, and then they had the overtime wins that were like, what's going on with this team right now? And then it came out after they started winning a couple of games because that's just like when the story comes out, right? But at Hombris tweeted out, I guess I wanted to feel positive. He was trying to, I guess they were trying to sort of rationalize a LaVine deal. And I was shutting every argument down. I guess I just wanted to feel positive because the last 3 games, the vibes are good, but Booth is so terrible that he screws that up too. And that was kind of how I felt.
I don't think Booth called Tony Jones and said, release.
No, I don't think so either.
But
I don't think so either. But he hasn't been quiet in his movements, let's say.
No, he never is.
So if Mike Singer, love Mike Singer, he wrote the Why So Serious Jokic biography, which I forgot to stop by the bookstore to pick up today, but I plan on doing that. Very much looking forward to reading that. But if he was brought in, but if he was brought in to be the director of intelligence to sort of plug a leaky ship, it's not working.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I do remember Mike sharing a snippet from his book before it came out, and it was about Jokic talking with Calvin Booth and him being like intent on trying to be, a Duncan level player where he's winning multiple championships, and what does he need to do to get to that? And obviously it's a partnership. One player can't just do it all. So you need a great team that's reliable and a great coach, and you need a, star player like Jokic. Obviously, I think he is to Duncan's caliber, but it's the other things that are now questions. So it's like, I'm wondering with that in Booth's mind, where I'm sure he wants to do that too. Like he's not trying to make the Nuggets lose. It makes me wonder about the likelihood that he is going to try to make a trade, because I wouldn't be surprised if he is taking this very seriously, that he wants to win as many championships with Jokic as possible. It's just not the greatest record right now. So.
I mean, he did win one. Like, we don't have to like super exaggerate. Like, this guy's a total bum and all that. He did get us KCP, even though he let KCP walk later. And he brought in Bruce for the 1 year that he was able to. Like, that has nothing to do with the front office. We were just legally not able to retain Bruce Brown. And, drafted Christian, drafted Peyton, who, to this point hasn't been able to be a facet in a playoff rotation yet, like full time. And that's another concern for this season. But he drafted Julian, drafted De'Ron, and those have been good moves, regardless of all of the other moves, that they've done that have been bad. Extended Aaron, extended Jamal, which I think were the right thing to do. It's just it's been rough. It's been rough. I think that the interesting part about all this is again, the thing that they seem to be focused on with a lot of these moves when it comes to, they're talking about wing scoring. They're talking about needing it for the regular season and the postseason. I get the postseason concerns, but regular season, again, we're top 5 offense, and the issue has been the defense, and they want to get smaller and make the defense worse. So I just need them to lock in here and like focus on the clear areas of concern that we already have instead of exacerbating them. But, what do I know? It's a tough job. It's a lot for MPJ, man. And we're about to get into that with our last news story. MPJ's brother was, I don't know if we talked about this on the show, because I think the news was happening maybe right before the playoffs last year, about how Jontay had been caught as part of this like bumbling like gambling ring where like a bunch of people were like betting on two-way players and like betting like $80,000 at a time on things that two-way players are doing obviously get caught. Text messages, everything. And Jontay was charged and convicted of wire fraud connected to this gambling where he was like, helping people like bet his unders on props and like sitting out of games, like that kind of thing. And he was actually scheduled to be sentenced today. Like as we sit here recording, like the news came out, it was either yesterday or the day before, about his sentencing being today. And when I checked the update before the show, it turns out that the sentencing was delayed until next year. As Will's reaction to that was like, yeah, that's because court stuff always gets delayed, which is very true. So that's going to be happening, I guess, next year. It's interesting. I wonder if he's in custody awaiting sentencing or not. Like, I wonder if he's like able to spend the holidays with his family, like all that. Anyway, like the reason I bring this up, and especially next to the MPJ story, is not just because it's, it's related to the NBA and all of that with that sport, but, MPJ and his family have, he's gone through a lot with his family over the last few years. I think all the guys on the teams, like the main guys on the team, really have. And this story with Jontay being suspended from the NBA, like it's a life ban, and then also having legal charges brought in. He's being charged in Canada is the other thing, because he was a Toronto Raptor when all of this was happening. So that's got to be a weird situation. Yeah. It's just like really incredibly stressful when they're like, his brothers in particular have, gotten involved in a lot of messed up stuff.
Yeah, it's really sad. And, I just hope the best for him and that he can get through whatever this trade season will bring for him and he'll be okay, which is kind of why I'm hoping if we do make a trade, I mean, I hope the Nuggets get what's best for them, but if he could go to like the Hawks and play with Trey, I think he would be at least happy about that because they're buddies, and that maybe Bogey would come back and play with Jokic and you'd get like some friends reuniting and such. But the NBA.
Okay, but let's talk about like some basketball fits. Like, let's bring some guys back that can like play some point of attack defense and but like do something helpful for us.
Well, obviously we'd get other guys in the Hawks trade, but listeners, thank you so much for spending the time and hanging out with us. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching this and you liked what you saw, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing so you don't miss future shows. And the clip channel where we'll upload clips and snippets from the show. Remember, winning is fun and losing always sucks.
Sure does. But winning is awesome.